The space station called 7 was old and tired. Its walls were gray and stained. Its air smelled like oil and rust, and too many bodies packed into too small a space. Thousands of beings from hundreds of worlds walked through its corridors every day. They bought things. They sold things. They argued and laughed and fought and ignored each other. The station did not care about any of them. It simply existed, spinning slowly in the darkness between stars. In the lower levels where the lights flickered and the floor plates rattled, there lived the forgotten ones. The refugees, the poor, the ones who had nowhere else to go. Among them were There were a small people. Even the adults stood no taller than a human child. Their skin was pale purple like the first light of dawn on a distant world. Their eyes were large and silver, like pools of liquid metal that caught every bit of light and held it. They had once lived on a beautiful planet called Prime, green forests, blue oceans, cities that sang with music and art. But that was before the Dominion Corporation came. The Dominion was not a government, it was not an army, it was simply a business. A very large business that wanted the minerals buried deep beneath Prime. They did not ask permission. They did not offer payment. They simply arrived with their machines and their soldiers and began to dig. They had no weapons. They had no fleet. They could only run. Now they lived in places like this, dark corners of stations that nobody else wanted. They worked jobs that nobody else would take. They survived, barely. Myra was 8 cycles old. In human years, she would be close to 7. She was small even for a child, with thin arms and legs and a face that had forgotten how to smile. She lived with her mother in a room no bigger than a closet. They had one bed, one lamp, and one small pot for cooking. That was everything they owned. Her mother's name was Lyra. She worked in the cargo holds, cleaning floors and scrubbing walls. It was hard work for little pay. 12 credits a week, enough for food. Sometimes enough for medicine, never enough for safety. 3 weeks ago, Lyra had started coughing. At first it was nothing, just a small cough, dry and quiet. Myra did not worry. Her mother was strong. Her mother had carried her across 3 star systems to escape the Dominion. Her mother would be fine. But the cough got worse. It became wet and heavy. Lyra started sleeping more and eating less. Her purple skin began to look pale, almost gray. Her silver eyes lost their shine. And then, 5 days ago, Myra noticed something that made her blood turn cold. She could see through her mother's hand. The Fade sickness. Every knew about it. Every feared it. It was a disease that attacked their bodies at the deepest level, making their flesh slowly become transparent. First the hands, then the arms, then the rest. If it was not treated, the body would simply fade away until nothing was left. There was medicine, a special treatment made only for it cost 200 credits. Lyra earned 12 credits a week. Myra sat on the floor of their tiny room and watched her mother sleep. Lyra's breathing was shallow and rough. Her transparent hand lay on top of the thin blanket, and Myra could see the outline of the fabric through her mother's fingers. She had to do something. Myra looked around the room. They had nothing to sell, no extra clothes, no jewelry, no tools or devices, nothing of value at all. Except one thing. Myra reached under her shirt and pulled out a thin chain. Hanging from the chain was a small braid made of crystal. It caught the dim light and sparkled with colors that did not exist in the normal world. Blue and gold and silver and something that had no name. It was beautiful. It was ancient. It was the only thing she had left of her old life. Her soul thread. Every child received a soul thread at birth. It was made by their grandmother, woven from crystals found only on Prime. The thread connected them to their ancestors, to their history, to their identity as a people. To sell a soul thread was unthinkable. It meant giving up everything you were. It meant becoming nobody. Myra looked at her mother, then she looked at the soul thread. There was no choice. She put on her shoes, tucked the soul thread into her pocket, and slipped out of the room while her mother slept. The corridors of the refugee sector were narrow and dark. Others watched her pass with tired eyes. They did not ask where she was going. They had their own problems. The market was 3 levels up. Myra climbed the stairs slowly, saving her strength. She had not eaten much in the last few days. She had been giving most of her food to her mother. When she finally reached the market, she stopped and stared. It was loud, so loud. Beings of every shape and size pushed past each other, shouting prices and arguing deals. Huge merchants with gray skin and tusks sold weapons and armor. Traders with clicking legs offered rare spices and medicines. Sleek dealers in expensive suits whispered about illegal goods. The air was thick with smells and sounds and colors. Myra felt very small. She took a deep breath and walked into the crowd. She pulled the soul thread from her pocket and held it up so that everyone could see it. "Please," she said, "please, will anyone buy this? It is very old, very valuable." Nobody looked at her. A merchant walked past, his heavy feet shaking the floor. Myra stepped in front of him and held up the thread. "Please, sir, it is a soul thread, very rare, worth 200 credits." The looked down at her. His small eyes showed no interest, no pity, nothing at all. He stepped around her and kept walking. Myra tried again. She approached a group of traders, their antennae waving in the recycled air. "Please, my mother is sick. I need credits for medicine. This thread is all I have." They made clicking sounds that might have been laughter. They turned away. Myra stood in the middle of the market, surrounded by thousands of beings, and felt completely alone. She was just a child, poor, weak, invisible. Nobody here cared if she lived or died. Nobody cared if her mother faded away into nothing. She walked for hours. She approached every merchant, every trader, every shopper who passed by. She begged. She pleaded. She offered her soul thread to anyone who would listen. Nobody stopped. Her legs began to ache. Her stomach growled with hunger. Her eyes burned with tears she refused to let fall. Children learned not to cry. Crying did not help. Crying changed nothing. She was about to give up. She was about to go back to that tiny room, climb into bed beside her dying mother, and wait for the end. And then she saw the human. He was tall, very tall, like all humans. His skin was brown, and his hair was black and cut short. He wore a uniform she did not recognize, dark blue with strange symbols on the shoulders. He was walking through the market with a frown on his face, looking at nothing in particular. Myra did not know much about humans. She had heard stories. Some said they were violent and dangerous. Some said they were weak and soft. Some said they were the strangest species in the galaxy, doing things that made no sense for reasons nobody could understand. She did not care about any of that. She only knew that he was walking toward her. And unlike everyone else in the market, his eyes actually moved to look at her as he approached. He saw her. Myra held up the soul thread one more time. "Please," she whispered, "please help me." Corporal Park was not having a good day. It had started badly when he woke up in his small bunk on the patrol ship and remembered that his shore leave had been canceled. Again. For the second time this month. His sergeant had smiled when she told him, which meant she enjoyed his suffering at least a little bit. Then the coffee machine broke. Then his squad got reassigned from the comfortable upper levels to patrol duty in the lower market district. The place smelled like engine grease and desperation. The food stalls sold things that might have been meat or might have been rubber. Could not tell the difference. And now he was walking through the loudest, most crowded market he had ever seen, surrounded by aliens of every possible shape and size, all of them pushing and shoving and shouting. And all he wanted was to find somewhere quiet to sit down and think about nothing. He was 24 years old. He had joined the Terran Defense Corps when he was 18, looking for adventure and purpose. 6 years later, he had found mostly paperwork and patrol duties on stations that all looked the same. But he was still a soldier. He still believed in the things he had been taught: protect the weak, serve the innocent, stand up when others sit down. He just had not expected that lesson to find him in a dirty market, on a rusting space station, in the middle of nowhere. Was walking past a row of food stalls when he saw her. At first he almost missed her. She was so small, barely half a meter tall, with purple skin and huge silver eyes that caught the light in a way that made them look like they were glowing. She wore clothes that were too big for her, probably hand-me-downs from some adult. Her feet were bare inside shoes that had holes in them. She was holding something up, something small and shiny, and she was looking at everyone who passed by with an expression that made his chest feel tight. Hope, desperate, dying hope. He stopped walking. A merchant came toward the girl. She stepped in front of him, holding up the shiny thing, saying something that could not hear. The looked down at her with empty eyes. Then he stepped around her like she was a piece of garbage on the floor and kept walking. Watched as the girl tried again. A group of this time. Same result. They clicked at her in what might have been mockery and walked away. He watched her stand there in the middle of the crowd, surrounded by thousands of beings, completely alone. Something cold settled in stomach. Not anger, not yet. Something older. Something he had learned about in school, in history lessons about Earth's past. He remembered seeing old photographs. Black and white images of children standing on street corners during wars and famines and disasters. Children with the same look in their eyes. The look of someone who had learned too young that the universe did not care about them. Started walking toward her. The girl saw him coming. She flinched. For a moment he thought she might run, but then she straightened her thin shoulders and held up the shiny thing one more time. "Please," she whispered, "please help me." Stopped in front of her. He was so much taller that he had to crouch down just to see her face properly. Up close, he could see how thin she was, how tired, how scared. "Hey there," he said. His voice came out softer than he expected. "What's your name?" The girl blinked. Her silver eyes went wide. Maybe nobody had asked her that question in a long time. "Myra," she said. "Hello, Myra. He looked at the thing she was holding. It was a braid made of crystal no longer than his finger. It sparkled with colors he had never seen before. Beautiful, clearly very old, clearly very important. "What is that?" he asked. "My soul thread." Myra's voice was barely a whisper. "Every child gets one when they are born. It connects us to our ancestors, to our history." She paused. Her hands were shaking. "I need to sell it. My mother is sick. She has the fade sickness. The medicine costs 200 credits. I do not have 200 credits. I do not have anything except this." Looked at the crystal braid. He looked at the little girl holding it. "How long have you been out here?" he asked. "Since morning. Nobody will buy it. Nobody even looks at me." Myra's voice cracked just a little. "They walk past like I am not here, like I do not exist." Felt something shift inside him. The cold thing in his stomach started to become warm, hot, angry. He looked around the market. All these beings, all this noise and activity and life, and not one of them had stopped. Not one of them had looked at this little girl and asked if she was okay. Not one of them had cared. What kind of galaxy was this? What kind of universe? Reached into his pocket and pulled out his credit chip. He checked the balance. 462 credits. His savings from 6 months of patrol duty. He had been planning to use it during his shore leave to buy some real coffee and maybe a new jacket. He did not hesitate. "I will give you 300 credits," he said. Myra stared at him. Her silver eyes went so wide that he could see his own reflection in them. 300, her voice was barely a breath. But that is too much. The thread is only worth 200. "I know," transferred the credits to a small chip and held it out to her. "Take it, buy the medicine for your mother, buy some food for yourself, keep what is left." Myra took the chip with trembling hands. She looked at it like it might disappear if she blinked. Then she looked back at him. Here, she held out the soul thread. Take it, it is yours now. Shook his head. Keep it. But you paid for it. That was not a trade, smiled. It felt strange on his face. He had not smiled in a while. That was a gift. Myra did not understand. He could see it in her eyes. The confusion, the disbelief. This was a galaxy where nothing was free. Everything had a price. Everyone wanted something in return. Why, she asked. Why would you do this? You do not know me. You do not know my mother. We are nothing to you. Was quiet for a moment. He thought about how to explain it, how to put into words something that he had always felt but never really said out loud. Where I come from, he said slowly, we have a saying. We believe that you can judge a society by how it treats its weakest members, the old, the sick, the children. He looked around at the market again. This station is failing that test. Everyone here walked past you like you were invisible, but I do not have to be like them. I can choose to be different. Myra clutched the soul thread to her chest. Her silver eyes were shining now, not with reflected light but with something else, something wet. You are very strange, she said quietly. Humans are very strange. Laughed, it surprised him. He had not laughed in a long time either. Yeah, he said, I have heard that before. He stood up and brushed the dust off his knees. The market noise surrounded them again, loud and chaotic, but somehow it felt different now, less cold. Your mother said, you said she has fade sickness. Do you have a doctor, someone who can give her the medicine? Myra's face fell. There is a clinic in the refugee sector, she said, but they do not have medicine. Nobody here has medicine. I would have to go to the trade district on the upper levels. Maybe there. She trailed off. The hope was leaving her eyes again. 300 credits was a lot, but if she could not find the right medicine, it would not matter. Made a decision. Show me where your mother is, he said. I want to meet her. Myra looked up at him with confusion. Why? Because I am going to help you, and not just with the credits. He held out his hand. It was big enough that her entire hand could fit in his palm. Come on, let us go see your mother, and then we are going to figure this out together. Myra stared at his hand for a long moment. In the culture, taking someone's hand meant trust. It meant you were putting yourself in their care. She had not trusted anyone except her mother in a very long time. But this human had seen her. He had stopped. He had given her everything she asked for and more, and now he was offering to help again for no reason she could understand. Slowly, carefully, Myra reached out and put her small purple hand in his. It felt warm, safe. Okay, she whispered, follow me. The refugee sector of 7 was unlike anything had ever seen. He had been on dozens of space stations during his 6 years in the Terran Defense Corps. He had walked through slums and poverty zones and places where people lived in conditions that would make most humans sick. But this was different. This was worse. The corridors were so narrow that he had to turn sideways to fit through some of them. The walls were covered with rust and mold and stains he did not want to think about. The lights flickered constantly, some of them broken completely, leaving entire sections in near darkness. The air was thick and heavy, recycled so many times that it tasted stale and dead. And everywhere there were people. Mostly, small purple beings with silver eyes that watched him pass with expressions of fear and confusion. A human here was strange. A human in uniform was stranger still. Felt their stares on his back as Myra led him deeper into the sector. How many of your people live here? He asked quietly. About 300, Myra said. Maybe more, it is hard to count. People come and go. Some find work on other stations and leave. Some, she paused, some do not survive. Said nothing, there was nothing to say. They walked for several more minutes, passing through corridors that all looked the same. Finally, Myra stopped in front of a small door. It was dented and scratched, the metal so thin that could probably punch through it with one hand. This is our home, Myra said. She opened the door. The room inside was tiny, 3 meters by 2 meters at most. There was a single bed against one wall, a small lamp in the corner, and a pot for cooking sitting on a heating plate. That was everything. No chairs, no table, no decorations, no personal items except for a thin blanket on the bed. On the bed lay a woman. Felt his breath catch in his throat. Lyra was thin, painfully thin. Her purple skin had faded to a pale gray, almost white in places. Her silver eyes were closed and her breathing was shallow and rough, each breath a small battle. But the worst part was her hands. Could see through them. Not completely, not yet, but her fingers were transparent enough that he could make out the shape of the blanket beneath them. It was like looking at glass that had been painted purple. This was the Fade sickness. This was what Myra had been trying to save her mother from. Myra walked to the bed and knelt beside it. She took her mother's transparent hand very gently, as if afraid it might break. "Mother," she said softly, "Mother, wake up, I brought someone, a human. He is going to help us." Lyra's eyes opened slowly. They were still silver, but the shine had gone out of them. They looked dull and tired, like stars that were burning out. She saw standing in the doorway. Fear crossed her face. "Myra," she whispered. Her voice was weak and rough. "Who is this? Why did you bring him here?" "It is okay, Mother." Myra squeezed her hand. "He helped me. He gave me credits for your medicine, 300 credits, and he did not take my soul thread. He let me keep it." Lyra's eyes moved too. The fear was still there, but now there was something else. Confusion, disbelief. The same look Myra had given him in the market. "Why?" Lyra asked. "Why would you help us? We have nothing, we are nothing." Stepped into the room. He had to duck his head to avoid hitting the low ceiling. "You are not nothing," he said. "You are a mother who is sick and a daughter who loves you enough to give up everything she has. That is not nothing. That is everything." Lyra stared at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, tears began to fall from her silver eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you." Nodded, but he knew that thanks were not enough. Credits were not enough. Myra had the money now, but the medicine she needed was not available in the refugee sector, and Lyra looked like she did not have much time left. "We need to find you proper medicine," he said. "The right kind. Specific treatment for the Fade sickness. Do you know where we can get it?" Lyra shook her head weakly. "There is no medicine on this station. The traders do not sell it. There is no profit in helping dying refugees." Felt that hot anger building in his chest again. This galaxy, this cold, cruel, indifferent galaxy, it made him want to punch something. But anger would not help. Action would. "Okay," he said. "Okay, let me think." He pulled out his communication device and checked the time. His patrol shift was not over for another 4 hours. If he did not report back soon, his sergeant would start asking questions. His sergeant. An idea began to form in his mind. Sergeant was tough. She was cold. She had a reputation for following rules and never bending them, but had served under her for 2 years. He had seen her when she thought nobody was watching. He had seen her give food to hungry dock workers when supplies ran low. He had seen her look the other way when young recruits broke minor rules to help people in need. Was not heartless, she just kept her heart well hidden. "I need to make a call," said. "Will you be okay for a few minutes?" Myra nodded. She was still holding her mother's hand. Stepped out of the tiny room and into the corridor. He walked a few meters away, then activated his communication device. "Corporal Park to Sergeant. Come in, Sergeant." There was a pause, then's voice crackled through the speaker. "Park, you are 40 minutes late for check-in. Where the hell are you?" "The refugee sector, Sergeant. Lower level 12. Another pause, longer this time. "The refugee sector. Why would you be in the refugee sector?" Took a deep breath. "I found a little girl in the market, Sergeant. 8 cycles old. Her mother is dying from Fade sickness. She was trying to sell her soul thread to buy medicine, but nobody would even look at her. I gave her credits, but the medicine she needs is not available on this station. Silence on the other end. Sergeant said, "I heard you, Park." His voice was flat, unreadable. "And what exactly do you expect me to do about it?" "I was hoping you might know someone who could help. A ship with medical supplies, a doctor who knows biology, anything." More silence. Waited. His heart was beating hard in his chest. He was breaking protocol. He was asking his superior officer to bend rules for a couple of refugees she had never met. There was a very good chance would order him back to the patrol ship and tell him to forget about this. But he had to try. Park said finally, "Stay where you are, I am coming to you." The communication ended. Lowered the device and let out a long breath. He did not know if that was good news or bad news, could be coming to help, or she could be coming to drag him back to the ship and put him on report. He walked back to the tiny room. Myra looked up at him with her big silver eyes. "What is happening?" she asked. "My sergeant is coming," said. "She might be able to help." "What if she cannot?" Looked at the little girl. She had been through so much, lost her home, lost her world, watched her mother slowly fade away while the galaxy ignored them both. And still, somehow, she had the strength to keep hopping. "Then we will find another way," he said. "I am not giving up, and neither should you." Myra looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. "You are very strange," she said again, "but I think maybe strange is good." Smiled. "Yeah," he said, "maybe it is." They waited together in the tiny room, the human soldier and the little alien girl, while Lyra slept her restless sleep on the thin bed. The lights flickered. The air was stale. The walls pressed in close. But somehow it did not feel quite so dark anymore. Someone had seen them, someone had stopped, someone was trying to help. And in a galaxy that so often looked the other way, that was more than enough. Sergeant arrived 30 minutes later. Heard her footsteps before he saw her. Hard, steady, purposeful. The kind of footsteps that said their owner was not someone to be questioned or delayed. The corridors moved out of her way quickly, pressing themselves against the walls as she passed. She appeared in the doorway of the tiny room like a storm cloud that had learned to walk. She was not tall for a human, but she had a presence that made her seem bigger. Her black hair was pulled back tight. Her dark eyes moved across the room, taking in everything in a single glance. Lyra on the bed, Myra kneeling beside her, standing in the corner trying to look like he was not nervous. "Park," she said, her voice was flat. "Report." Straightened his back. "This is Lyra, Sergeant. Refugee, advanced fade sickness, approximately 3 weeks into the disease. She needs species-specific treatment that is not available on this station." He gestured to Myra. "This is her daughter, Myra, 8 cycles old. She was attempting to sell her soul thread in the market to buy medicine. Nobody would help her. I intervened." His eyes moved to Myra. The little girl stared back with her silver eyes, trying to look brave, but could see her hands shaking. "A soul thread," said. "That is the cultural artifact given to children at birth, yes. The one that connects them to their ancestors." "Yes, Sergeant." "And you gave her credits for the medicine, but told her to keep the thread." "Yes, Sergeant." Was quiet for a moment. Her face showed nothing. Had served under her for 2 years, and he still could not tell what she was thinking most of the time. "How much did you give her?" 300 credits, Sergeant." One of his eyebrows rose just slightly. It was the closest thing to surprise had ever seen on her face. 300, that is most of your savings, Park." "Yes, Sergeant." Looked at him, looked at Myra, looked at Lyra on the bed, her hands transparent, her breathing shallow. Then she turned and stepped out into the corridor. "Follow me," she said, "all of you." Helped Myra lift her mother from the bed. Lyra was so light, too light, like holding a bundle of hollow bones. She could barely walk, so carried her in his arms like a child. Her transparent hands hung limply at her sides. They followed through the maze of the refugee sector. They watched them pass, their silver eyes wide with wonder. Nobody spoke. The only sound was footsteps and Lyra's rough breathing. They climbed stairs. They walked through corridors that slowly became wider and cleaner. The lights stopped flickering. The air began to smell less stale. They were leaving the lower levels behind. Finally, they reached a door that led to a docking bay. Typed a code into the panel and the door slid open. Beyond it was a ship. It was not a large ship. A medium-sized frigate, sleek and white, with red crosses painted on its sides, medical symbols. The name was printed near the nose in clean black letters, JIYON. "This is a medical vessel," said. "Yes," walked toward the ship. "It arrived yesterday for resupply. Captain Han is an old acquaintance of mine. We served together during the orbital wars." She stopped at the bottom of the boarding ramp and pulled out her communication device. I am at your boarding ramp. I need a favor." A voice crackled through the speaker, female, slightly amused. "What a surprise. You never call unless you want something." "I want something." "Of course you do. What is it this time?" Looked back at the woman in his arms, at the little girl holding onto his jacket. "I have a female with advanced fade sickness. Maybe 3 weeks in. She needs treatment. The station does not have the right medicine." Silence on the other end. Said slowly, "That is tricky. We have some general antivirals, but fade sickness requires specific treatment. I would need to run diagnostics, create a custom protocol." "Can you do it?" Another pause. "Bring her in, Bay 3. The communication ended, put the device away and looked at. "Well," she said, "what are you waiting for? Move." Moved. The inside of the was clean and bright. White walls, polished floors, the smell of disinfectant and recycled air that was actually fresh. Medical equipment lined the corridors, and crew members in white uniforms moved past with purpose and efficiency. Bay 3 was a small treatment room with a single bed and enough equipment to fill a hospital. A woman was waiting for them. She was middle-aged, with gray streaks in her black hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She wore the uniform of a Terran medical officer with captain's bars on her shoulders. "On the bed," she said, gently. Laid Lyra on the bed as carefully as he could. The woman he assumed was Captain immediately began attaching sensors to Lyra's body, her hands moving with practiced speed. "Fade sickness," she muttered. "I have read about it but never seen it in person. Fascinating." She paused, looking at Lyra's transparent hands. "And terrible. This is quite advanced. Why did she not seek treatment sooner?" "She is a refugee," said from the doorway. "They have nothing, no credits, no access to proper care. The station does not exactly welcome them." His jaw tightened. "Of course it does not." She worked in silence for several minutes, checking readings, adjusting equipment, typing notes into a data pad. Myra stood in the corner, watching everything with wide silver eyes. Stayed close to her, one hand on her shoulder. Finally stepped back. "The disease is advanced but not terminal. Not yet. I can create a treatment protocol using our medical synthesizer. It will take time. She will need to stay here for at least 3 days, maybe 4. Myra made a small sound. "Hope." "Will she live?" she asked. Looked at the little girl. Her expression softened just slightly. "If my crew has anything to say about it, yes, she will live." She turned to a young medic standing nearby. "I want round-the-clock monitoring, vitals every hour. If anything changes, you wake me immediately." The young medic nodded. "Yes, Captain." Looked back at Myra. "You can stay with her if you want. We have spare bunks for family members. It is not much, but it is better than wherever you came from." Myra looked at, her silver eyes were shining. "Is this real?" she whispered. "Is this really happening?" Smiled. "It is real." Myra walked slowly to her mother's bed. Lyra's eyes were open now, watching everything with confusion and wonder. Her transparent hand reached out and Myra took it gently. "We are safe, Mother," Myra said. "The humans are going to help us. We are going to be okay." Lyra's eyes moved then to Captain. "Why?" she whispered. "Why are you doing this?" Crossed her arms. "Because we can," she said simply. "Because someone has to." Watched from the doorway as and her team began their work. The synthesizer hummed. The monitors beeped, checked and double-checked every reading. He felt a hand on his shoulder. "You did good, Park," she said quietly. "Stupid, against protocol, probably going to cause me a lot of paperwork, but good." Looked at his sergeant. "You helped too, Sergeant. You did not have to come. You did not have to call in a favor from Captain." Was quiet for a moment. "I was in the market yesterday," she said. "Before our shift, I saw the girl, the same one." She paused. "I walked past. Did not know what to say." "I have been thinking about that all day," continued. "Thinking about what kind of person walks past a child begging for help. Thinking about what kind of galaxy lets that happen." She looked at him. "And then you called, and you had not walked past. You had stopped. You had done what I should have done." She turned away. "Get some rest, Park. Tomorrow we have a lot of work to do." She walked out of the medical bay, her footsteps echoing in the corridor. Stayed. He watched Myra sitting beside her mother, holding her hand, watching every movement of the medical team. He watched Captain working late into the night, her crew gathered around her, all of them focused on saving one refugee woman who the rest of the galaxy had forgotten. He thought about what it said, about walking past, about stopping. Maybe that was the difference between humans and everyone else. Maybe that was the thing that made them strange. They stopped. Even when it was hard, even when it cost them something, even when nobody else would. They stopped. 4 days passed. On the first day, Lyra slept. Her body was fighting hard and the medicine was working slowly through her system. Captain checked on her every few hours, stayed at her bedside through the night, watching the monitors, adjusting the treatment. Myra refused to leave. She slept on a small cot beside her mother's bed, waking up every time Lyra made a sound. On the second day, Lyra's hands began to change. The transparency was fading. Color was returning, pale at first, almost pink. Then slowly, the familiar purple began to show through. Myra cried when she saw it. She held her mother's hand and watched the skin become solid again. On the third day, Lyra woke up and asked for food. It was a small request, simple, but Myra burst into tears when she heard it. Her mother had not asked for food in weeks. Her mother had not wanted anything except sleep. This was different. This was life coming back. On the fourth day, Lyra sat up in bed. Her silver eyes had their shine again. Her skin was purple and solid and real. She was still weak, still thin, but she was there, she was present, she was alive. Came to visit every day after his patrol shifts. He would sit in the corner of the medical bay and talk with Myra about small things, her favorite foods, her memories of Prime, the stories her grandmother used to tell her before the Dominion came. He learned that children loved to sing, but Myra had not sung in 2 years. He learned that the soul thread she wore was over 200 years old, passed down through 7 generations. He learned that before the refugees came to 7, they had been on 4 other stations, each one pushing them away, each one treating them like problems instead of people. He also learned that word was spreading. In the refugee sector were talking. They were talking about the human soldier who had given 300 credits to a child in the market. They were talking about the sergeant who had brought a dying woman to a medical ship. They were talking about the captain and her crew who had worked for 4 days to save someone they had never met. For the first time in years, they were talking about hope. On the 5th day, Lyra was well enough to leave the medical bay. Captain gave her medicine to take for the next several weeks. She gave Myra a bag of food from the ship's stores. She gave them both clean clothes and new shoes. "Thank you," Lyra said. Her voice was still weak, but it was clear. "Thank you for saving my life. I do not know how to repay you." Smiled, it made her look younger. "You can repay me by living well," she said. "By taking care of your daughter, by not giving up." Lyra nodded. Tears were falling down her purple cheeks. "I will not give up," she whispered. "I promise." Walk them back to the refugee sector. The corridors seemed different now. Less dark, less hopeless. Maybe it was just his imagination, or maybe hope was a kind of light that changed the way things looked. At the entrance to the sector, they stopped. Myra looked up with her silver eyes. "Will I see you again?" she asked. "I hope so," said. "My ship is stationed here for another month. I will come visit when I can." Myra was quiet for a moment. Then she reached up and touched the soul thread braided into her hair. "You gave me everything," she said. "And you asked for nothing. You saved my mother. You changed our lives. How can I ever thank you?" Crouched down so he could look at her face to face. "You do not have to thank me," he said. "Just remember. Remember that someone saw you. Remember that someone stopped. And someday, when you are grown up and strong, maybe you will see someone else who needs help, and maybe you will stop too." Myra nodded slowly. "I will remember," she said. "I promise." She hugged him. Her small arms wrapped around his neck and she held on tight, hugged her back gently, carefully. "Goodbye," she whispered. "Goodbye, Myra." She let go and took her mother's hand. Together, they walked into the refugee sector, disappearing into the maze of corridors and flickering lights. Watch them go. 2 weeks later, the Terran Defense Corps issued a statement. It was unusual. The Corps did not normally make public statements about individual actions, but this time was different. News of what had happened on 7 had spread. The diaspora, scattered across 100 stations and 1,000 ships, was talking about the human who had stopped. The story had reached news networks. Reporters were asking questions. The Dominion Corporation had filed a formal complaint. They claimed that Terran soldiers were interfering with commercial operations in non-Terran space. They demanded an apology and a promise that it would not happen again. The Terran Defense Corps responded with 6 words. "We see everyone, we stop." Within a month, Station 7 had its first human-funded medical clinic in the refugee sector. Captain Han donated equipment from the before she left. Other human ships passing through began to do the same. Medicines, food, clean water, things that cost the humans very little but meant everything to the people who received them. Sargent became the liaison between the Terran Corps and the diaspora. She met with their leaders. She listened to their stories. She found ways to help that did not break too many rules, and when rules got in the way, she bent them. Corporal Park was promoted to sergeant. His new assignment was humanitarian operations. He spent his days finding people who had been forgotten and making sure someone finally saw them. And Myra grew up. She stayed on 7 with her mother for another year until Lyra was strong enough to work again. Then they moved to a smaller station that had a growing community. Myra went to school. She learned to read and write. She made friends. She started to sing again. She never forgot the soul thread braided into her hair, and she never forgot the human who had taught her what it meant. 10 years later, Myra stood in the market of a station called Nova Point. She was 18 cycles old now, tall for a strong. Her silver eyes were bright and full of life. She was walking through the crowd when she saw something that made her stop. A child, small and thin, green skin and black eyes, some species she did not recognize. The child was holding something small and shiny, offering it to everyone who passed. Nobody stopped. Nobody looked. Myra walked toward the child. "Hello," she said. "What is your name?" The The child looked up at her with fear and hope. The child whispered, "Hello, I am Myra," she smiled. "What are you selling?" The child held up the shiny object, some kind of jewel. "My father gave it to me," said, "before he died, but my mother is sick. She needs medicine. Please, will you buy it?" Myra looked at the jewel. She looked at the child. She thought about a day long ago when she had stood in a market just like this one, when she had been small and scared and invisible. And then a human had stopped. "I will give you 500 credits," Myra said, "and you can keep the jewel." Stared at her. "Why?" the child whispered. "Why would you do that?" Myra touched the soul thread in her hair. "Because someone did it for me once," she said, "and they told me that someday I would do it for someone else. So here I am." She held out her hand. "Come on, let us go help your mother." Took her hand. And somewhere across the galaxy, on a patrol ship moving through the darkness between stars, Sergeant Park smiled in his sleep. He did not know why, but somehow he felt warm. The galaxy was still cold. It was still cruel. It still forgot the weak and ignored the desperate. But in the darkness, lights were growing. Small lights, human lights, lights that spread from person to person, from world to world, from one act of kindness to another. One day, maybe, those lights would be enough to change everything. For now, they were enough to change one life at a time. And that was a start.